The night carried a cold that didn't just touch your skin, it crawled beneath it, settling deep in the bones, quieting everything it touched. Even the old house seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the slow rhythm of a spoon scraping the bottom of a pot. Steam rose in ghostly tendrils, fogging the kitchen window until the world beyond blurred into nothing. My name is Clara, and at 44, I've lived long enough to know that silence like that rarely means peace. It often means something's coming. For most of my life, I've worn the title of single mother like armor. My son, Ethan, has always been my reason for keeping that armor polished. The one person who made the fight worth it. 22 now, still chasing his literature degree, still trying to find his place in a world that demands too much and gives too little. We've endured storms together, real and otherwise. But that night, something in the air felt wrong. When Ethan came home, it was later than usual. His jacket was damp from the frost, his hair a disheveled mess of dark curls that shadowed his tired eyes. But it wasn't just the fatigue of a long day. It was a weariness that came from too many nights without rest, from dreams starting to feel more like obligations. "Mom," he said softly, his voice barely cutting through the hum of the old refrigerator. "I don't feel so great." There was something in the way he said it, the small break in his tone, that twisted something deep inside me. I set the ladle down, wiping my hands on the dish towel. "You look exhausted, sweetheart. Go lie down. I'll bring you some soup in a bit." He gave me that tired half smile, the one I hadn't seen since he was a boy, trying to convince me he was fine after falling off his bike. Then he turned and disappeared down the hall, his steps heavy against the creaking wood floor. Our house, an aging Victorian that always seemed to sigh in the cold, felt even larger in that moment. The heater had been stubborn for weeks, its efforts weak and inconsistent, like it too was running out of strength. I ladled soup into a bowl, grabbed one of the heavy quilts from the armchair, and made my way to Ethan's room. He was already lying down, face turned toward the wall, his breathing shallow but steady. I tucked the blanket around his shoulders the way I used to when he was little. "Thanks, Mom," he murmured, eyes fluttering shut. For a brief moment, the years between us dissolved. I wasn't a weary mother. He wasn't a grown man. It was just us, the way it had always been. But as I stood there, watching him drift off, something deep inside whispered that this wasn't just exhaustion. It was something heavier, something I couldn't name. The house groaned as the wind pressed against the windows. Then, a sound. Ding-dong. The doorbell's sharp chime cut through the stillness, startling me enough that I nearly dropped the bowl. I hurried to the front door, the floorboards protesting under my feet. When I opened it, a rush of icy air bit at my face. Standing there was Tom, our neighbor from across the street. His coat was powdered with snow, and a flashlight dangled from his gloved hand. "Evening, Clara," he greeted, his breath visible in the cold. "Saw your lights on. Thought I'd check in. Heater still giving you trouble?" For a moment, I just stared at him. His familiar face, the warmth in his voice. It was ordinary, comfortingly ordinary. "Yes," I finally said, exhaling a shaky laugh. "It's acting up again. I was just about to—" Then I stopped. Behind Tom, the night stretched empty and still. But just beyond his shoulder, near the edge of the porch light's reach, I thought I saw movement, a flicker, like someone standing there, half hidden in the snow. "Clara?" Tom's voice snapped me back. "You all right?" I blinked, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, glancing past me into the dimly lit hallway. Well, if the heater's out again, I've got a spare one you can borrow. No sense freezing tonight. That would be wonderful, I said, stepping back so he could come in. As he crossed the threshold, I cast one last glance toward the yard. Nothing, just the whisper of snow against the trees. But even as I closed the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been there, watching. And for the first time in a long time, I felt afraid to turn off the lights. Tom gave a polite nod as I stepped aside to let him in. The rush of cold air followed him into the hallway, curling around my legs before disappearing into the dim warmth of the living room. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind of man who'd fixed the same problem a dozen times before. Without needing to ask, he knelt beside the heater, his gloved hands already working at the panel. "Still fighting this old thing, huh?" he said lightly, his voice breaking the silence. "These models have more attitude than half the people I know." I forced a small smile. "You're not wrong." He chuckled and kept talking. Small talk about Ethan's college classes, the library I worked at, the way the town always seemed a little emptier after Christmas. His words filled the air, but I barely heard them. My mind kept wandering back to Ethan's face, pale, drawn, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Then I heard movement behind me. Ethan was standing in the hallway, half hidden in the shadows, his shoulder leaning against the wall. The faint yellow light from the lamp stretched across his face, catching the sharpness in his expression. He didn't say a word, just watched. For a moment, I thought he might speak, but his eyes, those once bright, thoughtful eyes, seemed distant, unfocused. Not angry, not sad, just elsewhere. Tom noticed him, pausing mid-sentence. "Hey there, Ethan," he greeted with a friendly nod. "Rough day?" Ethan didn't answer. He only gave a faint shrug, his lips pressing into a thin line. The silence that followed was brittle, like something fragile suspended in the air, threatening to crack. Tom tightened the last screw and stood up. "That should hold for a while," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "But I'll swing by tomorrow, make sure it's still running smooth." "Thank you, Tom," I said, trying to sound steady. He smiled, but it faltered when his gaze flicked toward Ethan again. There was something uncertain in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, maybe concern. Then he nodded to me, gave a quiet goodnight, and stepped out into the snow. The door closed with a soft click, and the sound seemed to echo through the house. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The heater buzzed faintly, the pipes groaning as they tried to push warmth through the cold bones of the old house. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Mom, I don't want you to worry, okay? I'll figure this out. I just need a little time." Something about the way he said it, the weight in those few words, told me he wasn't talking about homework or long shifts anymore. I reached out, resting a hand on his arm. "You don't have to do this alone," I said softly. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together, like we always have." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. The hardness in his eyes softened, and for the first time that night, I caught a glimpse of my boy again. The same one who used to curl into my side during thunderstorms, trusting that I could keep the world from falling apart. He leaned forward, resting his head gently against my shoulder. I froze for a moment, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the fragile peace between us. "I know, Mom," he murmured. "I know." We stayed like that, two tired souls clinging to a quiet moment in a house that had forgotten how to feel warm. Outside, The wind howled through the trees, scattering snow across the porch. Inside, the heater rattled weakly, doing its best to fight the cold that kept seeping in. Later that night, after Ethan drifted into a restless sleep, I stood by his doorway for a long time. His face looked peaceful in the half-light, but there was a tension there. Something unspoken, coiled just beneath the surface. The air still felt thick, heavy with everything left unsaid. Yet beneath it all, there was a fragile sense of hope. The kind that doesn't shine, but flickers. The kind you hold on to not because it's strong, but because it's all you have left. And as I turned out the light and whispered goodnight, a quiet thought settled in the back of my mind. One I couldn't shake. Sometimes, the moments that feel like peace are only the calm before the truth arrives.